Good morning, everyone. We have some. Good morning, Madam Clerk. Even though we don't have any we don't have any ordinances to hear this morning, right? I didn't add anything on that I forgot about. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Well, good morning again, everyone. We are joined by some of our esteemed partners. They can come on up to the table. We have our Director of Building and Housing, Sally Martin O'Toole. We have Mr. Isaac Robb from the Western Reserve Land Conservancy. And we have Dr. Colby from the Building and Housing Department as well. We will hear a presentation from Mr. Isaac Robb regarding the City of Cleveland Property Inventory 2023 study. We'll hear from our Director, Sally Martin O'Toole, with any additional comments regarding the property survey and also some upcoming pieces that this committee will be hearing. I'm sure she's going to ad-lib along the way as Mr. Robb goes through the presentation and Mr. Colby. So without further ado, thank you all for being here. I know members are watching on the screen on TV 20 and others throughout the neighborhoods as well. So again, good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, councilpersons, for having us today. Many of you have already heard a lot about the property survey, which we conducted in the last winter, between 2022 and then spring of 2023, wrapping that up. Western Reserve Land Conservancy helped lead the survey, and on our staff, Dr. Tim Colby was our lead, and they're going to give you a little bit more insight about what the findings were, how to access some of that information, and how that information is informing our work going forward, because it was a starting point for us. We know that we had a lot of work to do in building and housing, and this was the basis. And so we've taken that information and now built upon it to create the Residents First legislative package, which this body will hear about more later.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for your time.
Good morning.
I've had the opportunity to present, sort of when we kicked this off, a bit of a progress report to this committee, and I'm really excited to provide sort of a high-level overview of the results of the citywide property inventory. We've had the opportunity to sort of talk to different housing stakeholders, resident groups, do a little bit of media, and I know when we talk about 163,000 parcels and a lot of different questions and data, people's eyes can sort of glaze over and interest can be lost. And so what I was hoping to do sort of to kick this off today, you know, I think whenever you open up, whether it be Cleveland.com, New York Times, CNN, whatever, people always talk about the housing market. And the first thing people always talk about is something that starts with a dollar sign. They'll say, oh, median rent in San Francisco is this, or, you know, houses in Miami are selling for this. And I recognize the importance of the housing market, but what I would like to focus on today is to reframe that just a little bit and think about us all being part of a housing system locally. We don't control interest rates. We don't control the supply chain of drywall, but what we do control is what is happening within the boundary of the city of Cleveland. And no body has probably better insight into that or influence over the housing system than Cleveland City Council. You are listening from people in different wards that have different concerns and have lived in the neighborhoods for different periods of time. And this data, we like to say, doesn't make us smarter, but it helps you meet people where they're at in the housing system that we exist within. And so I hope as we present this data and talk about some of the existing city initiatives that are already underway, your wheels are spinning on how can this data help empower you to make hard decisions with scarce resources in the housing system that we all operate within. So as Director Martin O'Toole mentioned, this was something that we kicked off in the fall, early winter of last year. There were 163,000 parcels that we have data on. I like to say that this is 163,000 opportunities to show our constituents, our neighbors, our residents, how much we care. This could be something as a lifted sidewalk, it could be a vacant property, or it could be the ribbon cutting for a new apartment building. All of these things impact everyone's sort of daily life, and we wouldn't have been able to undertake this without the partnership of Cleveland City Council, of the Building and Housing Department, as well as the funders, Rocket Community Fund, LISC, and the Cleveland Foundation. So real quick, I just want to point this out. This web map is available online. You can sort of scroll through the overall results, but if you have any specific questions, whether it's NST related or specific maps that you would like to see, please contact me. We have a strong GIS team in-house, and we are more than happy. The last thing I want to do is work so hard on a project like this, and then no one call me again, and call me in maybe 5 years and say, like, hey, can we refresh that? Like, we want to keep this evergreen and be working with you in real time. So feel free to call me, email me, and any questions you ask. One of your colleagues actually already asked about the number of vacant parcels in their ward, to match that with sidewalk conditions, and then if there was a tax delinquency. And we were able to put together a map, provide that. I'm not sure what they were going to do with that, but that's the type of thing that we can provide. So without further ado, I would like to show, obviously many of you here will be interested on the ward boundaries, but we also have this data on the neighborhood level in the SPA. You can zoom in at any scale here on the lower right, and then if you hit this home, it sort of goes to the full extent.
Is this, Mr. Chairman, is this a program that we can utilize in our offices?
Yes, through the chair. This is available on our website, and you can access it on your phone or from your desktop. Here are the overall results, and Dr. Kobe will go into more details on the analysis. I'm going to try and provide just an overview, again, of general results and then the alignment with existing city initiatives. So as you can see, out of the 163,000, the vast majority of our parcels are occupied structures. That being said, the second largest are vacant lots. And so we'll sort of go in to detail more on what the breakdown through these different categories are. The good news is the vast majority of occupied structures received an A, B, or C letter grade on their overall condition, and a much smaller minority received the D and F. That is due to the strong work both of our CDC partners, the Cuyahoga Land Bank, and the City Land Bank to address those most egregious vacant and distressed properties. Unsurprising, though, when we shift over to the condition of vacant structures, the letter grades are inversed. There are a higher percentage of D and F rated properties of the vacant structures than there are for the occupied structures. Again, not a surprise here, but the data does bear it out in a relatively unbiased way. I'm not going to spend too much time, but again, here is the comparison of the occupied structure grades versus the vacant structure grades. And you can, again, scroll in as you like to your specific ward or neighborhood and select the results for these different categorizations. I'm going to scroll through this quickly. This is just sort of general examples of what considered A, B, C grades, the methodology that the surveyors used. And the other thing I really want to highlight here, again, talking about the housing system, it doesn't matter if you're east of the Cuyahoga or west of the Cuyahoga, if you're north or south, there's a lot of really strong occupied housing stock in every neighborhood and every ward, and there are vacant and distressed properties in every ward and every neighborhood. The percentages obviously are different, but I think oftentimes things get lost that, oh, this neighborhood or this ward or this part of town is a one monolith, and there's so much complexity, and this data can really help tell that rich story that every block has more occupied structures on it than not, and a lot of people that have stayed in these neighborhoods and are working really hard to create those community bonds. And it's also worth noting that every parcel has at least one photo associated with it that you can also access as well. So you can, whether you're driving by or you're pulling up Google Maps or Google Earth, you can compare it to the results of the property inventory.
Oh. Wow.
Again, this is something that I think a lot of people are spending a lot of time exploring. I know Councilman Harsh and VAPAC have been, and with Dr. Kobe, have been looking at out-of-state investors and how does that compare. So we took a little bit deeper dive. I'm not saying that this data is 100% accurate because it is difficult to determine ownership at any given point in time, but we feel fairly confident with this. And these yellow points indicate out-of-state ownership. And then you can compare the out-of-state ownership by the grade. Again, unsurprisingly, you see a higher percentage of lower grades if it isn't locally owned. So again, when we're talking about code enforcement, we're talking about the deployment of ARPA funds or CDBG. Who pays and who benefits is always a key question that we should be asking. And using this data to say, okay, well, where are we seeing concentrations of out-of-state investor activity, trying to get out ahead of that from a code enforcement standpoint is a powerful narrative to share with your constituents. Obviously, lead has been a key issue for a number of years after the passage of the ordinance. So we took a specific look at where the lead placards have been placed. And then overlaying that, again, you can sort of pile this data on top of each other. So you could look at where the lead placards are placed versus the age of the homes, as well as some of the other questions we ask. We ask, is there peeling paint? Is there roof damage? Is there porch damage? What's the condition of bare soil around? And so you can, again, layer all that data to see where there are maybe potential lead hotspots to be addressed. But as you can see, there are a lot of structures in the city that has significant peeling paint. Bare soil, as I mentioned. So here's a comparison of the lead placards with those bare soil and peeling paint. Councilman, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm trying to find this here. We're doing this program now.
I would recommend Googling Western Reserve Land Conservancy, Cleveland Property Inventory 2023.
Councilman, we'll get the link for everyone to have.
Yes.
We'll make sure everybody gets it.
And this is, I think, a really telling example. This yellow orb here is the Madison Community Elementary School. This purple circle are the lead placards, and then these are structures that have peeling paint and bare soil in direct proximity to the school. So as we're evaluating safe routes to schools, things of that nature, again, what can we look at initially and how can we target our time and resources in the most strategic way possible? I'm not saying there are any right or wrong approaches to this or that there are any easy answers, but this does help provide a little bit of a guiding force to each of you as you're making legislative decisions. Vacant lots. This is something that is of particular interest to the Western Reserve Land Conservancy and our partners, and is something that, again, in the wake of the foreclosure crisis, we continue to see an uptick in. So not only do we have data on the over 30,000 vacant parcels within the city, but we also ask the surveyors to determine if they were improved. That could be maybe a fence, a garden, any sort of decorative landscaping. Typical, which would be, just sort of a mowed, vacant lot, or distressed, illegal dumping, tires, overgrown vegetation, things of that nature. So again, this is something that we can really determine where there are hot spots of both those positive interventions as well as where illegal dumping is occurring. So when you do deploy Public Works out with a front-end loader to pick things up, you can maybe go out and we can monitor this type of thing over time. And again, going back to the idea of this being a system that we're all a part of, we have seen really both positive and negative feedback loops. If there is an area of a hotspot of dumping, more dumping occurs. We made the mistake of, for anyone that has left a dumpster out over the weekend, we came back on Monday, we needed a second dumpster to collect the overflow from the first dumpster. Mm-hmm. If you plant trees or secure those vacant lots, you see those positive overflows as well. So again, it's how can we use this data to sort of see both the positive feedback loops as well as the negative feedback loops and make those types of interventions as quickly and as strategically as possible. You all know your wards. These are just sort of examples. Again, another thing, we counted people parking on a vacant lot as a sign of distress, just if there's any question on that. And again, I don't want this to be lost. There are an immense amount of improved vacant lots all throughout the city. And so that's really something that's again, it could be something as simple as a fence, side yard acquisition, tree planting, community gardens, all of the above. Those are great ways that we've found to sort of build community and have those sort of positive spillover effects throughout a street. And again, this, you can spend a little bit more time, but this is a hotspot analysis that shows where vacant lots have the highest concentration and where they are clustered.
What did you say?
This is the hotspot. So it shows in green where there are high concentrations of vacant lots. And so you can use this slider bar here. Whoops, excuse me. To sort of show where there are hot spots of vacant lots. Yep. Yes.
Go back this first. Slide it so we can see the vacant. Across the whole city. Shows how bad it is.
Well,
Is there vacant lots?
Those are high concentrations of
High
vacant lots.
concentrate hotspots.
When you move
Yep.
The other one is the actual lots.
This
When
out of
you
the way?
move the bar.
I-
Wow.
What
But-
is it?
I think what is
No, quick. You stop. Right there.
but again, it's where is the concentration of vacant lots, and is there a high concentration of improved vacant lots or distressed vacant lots? We've found that maybe where the illegal dumping is highest doesn't necessarily totally correlate with where the vacant lots are the highest as well. And that is something that I think, and we did also compare the 2015 to 2023 to sort of see the changes.
Can you have a way
Yep.
where you can, with this slide here,
Mhm.
show the wards, or you can see which wards have the most vacant lots? I know the east side has been in a real bad place going all back for 30 years now.
Right. We could show that over time, but we'd have to do a separate thing for that. Yeah. But we'd be happy to do that for you. And then again, here areas of illegal dumping and their frequency by ward.
And then,
Which ward is that?
Yeah, that's 4.
Yeah.
So those are the top illegal
What?
dumping locations?
Correct.
in the city?
Yes.
And we're the highest, 11,602.
So again, yeah, it's a total obviously each ward has a slightly different number of parcels, and so this is a percentage per ward. This is the dumping.
That's my biggest issue now.
Yes. Yep.
You see, Joe, there's a west side neighborhood.
And then Ward 2 is right behind you. Me and Bishop was getting killed out there.
You see there's a west side?
Is it?
14,
Let me see where this, let me see, can you see the west side?
right there.
Where's that?
Second, 8.2%.
Where's the?
Here's dumping on the west side.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, there it is. That's the stop there. Ward 1, Ward 6. Is that?
So again, there are ways to filter, and we can have photos for each of these instances. And again, this is where I'd like to spend a little bit of time focusing on the existing city initiatives. I know there's been a lot of movement with the 15-minute city. So we took that underlying data from the administration and really wanted to focus in on, again, if there is vacant lots within a 15-minute walk shed, which means close to high-frequency transit, again, as we're trying to focus on infill development, these would be good places to sort of start and then build out from there. And maybe some of the vacant lots that are outside of those 15-minute core areas would be maybe better candidates for reforestation and things like that. And again, working for the Land Conservancy, that's something that we tend to focus on in great detail. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just want to show we have information on every sidewalk in the city as well. So that's something that is really cool to see.
Show them the big hot spot, how much people are Just the sidewalk.
Yeah, here's this bald blocks. We have, and MoCap was really instrumental in creating these.
It's on fire.
So here are the heave blocks. So MoCap helped with those questions.
We need 200.
Can we go back for one moment
Yes.
to Richard Isaac on this one, the 15-minute city index, the lighter colors indicate. Oh, sorry, everybody.
You had 4 or 5 different people talking.
Apologies. Through our chair, the lighter color in this 15-minute city index indicates. Can you tell us again what the lighter color indicates?
Yeah, that similar to the hotspot analysis for dumping or vacant lots. My understanding is that shows the highest concentration of amenities within a 15-minute walk or transit ride in that area. So that could be a concentration of grocery stores, libraries, clinics, things like that, and the high-frequency transit stops. So the lighter colors have the higher score, and that's the area.
The more walkable.
The more, yes.
And so this tool, you anticipate this part of the tool could be used to anticipate or make, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You anticipate that this part of the tool could be used to make recommendations for development sites or?
Correct, so you could
Okay.
identify whether it's occupied structures, vacant structures, maybe for rehab, or vacant lots. If you have, again, scarce funds in our housing system to deploy them, within these 15-minute corridors and walk sheds within neighborhood plans, that would probably be a good place to look for sort of the first level of investment.
We see that at Citywide.
Yes. Here it is citywide. And then again, all the information from the property inventory could be layered on top of that 15-minute city initiative. I'm going to just scroll down to the urban tree canopy real fast. My supervisor, Matt Zone, wouldn't forgive me if I didn't mention that. This image I find to be really powerful because it shows the tree canopy at a regional scale, not just the city. And you can see the darker green, the higher percentage of tree canopy. And it's not necessarily an east or west side thing, it's a city of Cleveland thing. I mean, we are just light across the board.
Wow.
And yes.
On this point. Thank you. This is really, I think, interesting too. I'm curious too on, obviously, the city of Cleveland is never going to be as forested as a forested area, right? Just because we're a dense urban area. Do we have an understanding of like what would our optimal look like, right? Because like, again, if you go down to Cuyahoga Valley National Park, you're going to see dense green there, right? But we have buildings and roads and houses and hospitals and businesses. So not to say that we don't have a ton of work to do, but
Right.
I'm just curious if we can, because this map is, hopefully the city's going to get greener, but it's never going to be as green as some outlying areas, right? So
Great.
just because we're an
Chair.
urban center.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a great point. The short answer is the goal and what we feel is realistic and attainable based on available planting sites is a 30% tree canopy by 2040. Right now, we're about a 13 to 15% tree canopy. So that would be our target.
So
Double. And what I would like to share, and I totally agree, we can't even compare ourselves to Pittsburgh in this because they have a lot more topography, hillsides that aren't developable. So it really, again, is specific to the Cleveland context. But right here, I find to be the most telling. This is the border between Cleveland and Shaker. There's not a big difference in the built form between those communities to show how drastic of a drop-off it is based on an arbitrary political boundary.
Yep.
So that would be my response to that. We're never going to get to be 70%, Councilman, but we think 30% is achievable in most of the city.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may too, I'm always fascinated. This is the border where Shaker Heights put the physical barriers between the city of Cleveland and Shaker. So it's not even, there's an actual barrier there, which I think a lot of people don't know. I don't know if it's still there, Councilman. The physical barriers between Shaker Heights and Cleveland. Yeah, in Ward 1, it's crazy. I mean, they are still there. So, you know, I'm just saying, okay.
Point taken. Here's just an analysis of the vacant lots and where street trees exist. And with that, I have used up enough of all of your time. I will hand it over to Dr. Kobe to share some deeper analysis. Again, thank you so much for your time. Happy to answer any questions or follow up with you on an individual basis.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Rob, for the presentation. This is very good information here, and to be able to show, kind of how interactive it is. You can pinpoint, you can highlight, you can scroll in, you can overlap, you can do all of those things to produce the information that is wanted. And so I would recommend that anyone, not only just on DPS, but any other member of council who would like to go through and receive some one-on-one assistance from Mr. Rob, that they reach out and get that assistance. It'll be very much worth it, for sure. All right, we'll turn it over to Dr. Colby.
Thank you, Chairman.
And the presentation is on all the tablets as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, council members. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is kind of like there's a little bit of overlap between what Isaac talked about and what I'm going to talk about, but hopefully it'll give you kind of like a second chance to see that and maybe think about a couple more questions that might come to mind. But that's actually the great part about going after the director and Isaac when I do this presentation, is I don't have to talk as much. But so we're going to talk about kind of like who are our partners, how do we do it, and then what did we find. So we already kind of talked about this. Land Conservancy was really the external project manager. The internal city partners were the Department of Building and Housing, MOCAP, Community Development, and we're currently working with Urban AI on some data visualizations. Within the internal city partners, I just want to say a big thank you to the folks who were actually out in the field doing this survey. They were out all winter. I know we had a mild winter, but they were still out when it was 30 degrees. They were still out the day after it snowed a little bit. So just big thank you to the folks who were out doing that every day. We also had Healthy Homes Initiative staff helping do the survey work. And lastly, we already mentioned it, but just thank you again to our funders, Rocket Community Fund, Cleveland Foundation, and LISC. One last big thank you to the director. She was the one that actually went out and got this funding.
Nice.
So we did a two-day training late in October, kind of showed everybody how we were going to go out in the field and do this. We used tablets, we used the Regrid web app, and for every single parcel in the city, we had an individual stand there, take a photo, answer questions. There were 50 total questions that could be answered, not necessarily for every parcel. It depended if it was a structure or a lot. But they took their picture, they answered the questions, they went to the next one, and they did this for about 6 months, and they just really stuck with it and got it done. So there's kind of quality control throughout the project. Land Conservancy would continue to review the data, make sure people were answering the questions the right way, they were taking good photos. So kind of where we're at now is the analysis and the operationalization of this. So kind of what are the initial findings? How can we use this data to improve what we do? So we're starting to work on blight removal now in building and housing. So we're going out and checking all those vacant Ds and Fs. Do we need to condemn them or not? And we're also using this information to help us pivot to a more proactive way of doing code enforcement. So what did we find? I talked about a lot of this, so I might go quicker through some of these than others. But out of all the parcels that we surveyed, 117,000 parcels had a structure on it. 92% of those were occupied. So for a single-family house, occupied meant, that one unit was occupied. For an apartment building, occupancy could be as low as one unit in the apartment building. Chances are, if we determine that it was occupied, there's probably more than one unit in there occupied. But that's kind of how occupancy went. Great news is 63,000 parcels were graded an A or a B. Kind of thinking about that, those are really the parcels that, from a building and housing side, we don't necessarily need to worry about. Folks are upkeeping their house, generally speaking. And then we have this huge opportunity here with 43,000 parcels that we graded a C. These are the ones that we can keep a C, move up to a B, prevent from becoming Ds. And lastly, we still have this bit of blight removal to deal with. When you research these parcels, when you look them up and look at the property history, I would guess about 99% of them were probably touched in some way by the foreclosure crisis. There's 4,800 parcels that were graded a vacant D or an F. And now some fun with maps. So what I did for these is this is a point density map. So each parcel got converted to a point, and then I determined the density that there was. And I'll get into why that's important in a later slide, but for now, this kind of tells you where the greatest density of A and B properties are. Generally speaking, that's on the west side here, but we do have a couple nice hotspots on the east side as well. Those are the areas that are going to be in pink on the east side, and then you see those dark purple areas on the west side. So now this is the C properties. This is what I'm saying. This is where our opportunity is. And this is my favorite map of Cleveland that I've ever done. Because it doesn't matter if it's east or west, north or south, there's opportunity here in Cleveland to help solidify the quality of our housing stock in the city. It doesn't matter what neighborhood you're in, there's that opportunity that's there. And these are areas that need investment and they need work on code compliance. And lastly, this is where our blight removal work still needs to be done, predominantly on the east side in Glenville, St. Clair Superior, and then southeast side like Southern Buckeye Shaker, Mount Pleasant. So next up is lead risk. We already talked about housing quality in general, so we're going to talk specifically about lead risk here. And so of the 117,000 parcels that had a structure, 43,000 had at least one indicator of increased risk of lead poisoning. So increased risk was quantified as a visible lead placard, peeling paint, or bare soil. So if it hit any one of those marks, we considered that an elevated lead risk. In the occupied structures, 66% of them have no lead risk, according to the survey. When you look at vacant structures, you flip that, it's 64% have an indicator. So our vacant structures are more likely to present a lead risk to a future occupant. Checking out where that is visually in the city, we can see we have like 2 pockets on the west side and 2 or 3 pockets on the east side, depending on how we want to define it. So West Boulevard, Clark Fulton Stockyards, and then kind of like that Union Miles, Lee Harvard, Mount Pleasant area down on the southeast side, and then we have a spot up in Glenville. Vacant lots, Isaac already talked about vacant lots, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I'll just note that about 7.5% of the vacant lots had illegal dumping on them. And then when we look at where that's happening, this is where that density, this is where the methodology is important on the parcel density. So really what we're seeing here is the density of illegal dumping in residential neighborhoods. Because we know there's illegal dumping on industrial parcels, but those are big. So when you convert that to a point, it's going to be just less dense naturally. So in terms of residential dumping, we see that in Fairfax, and then Kinsman, Union Miles area.
We can pause there.
Yes,
Councilman
Chairman.
Joe Jones?
Yeah,
Use your mic.
You showed the slides.
Councilman, use your mic so we can hear.
You showed a slide earlier where you showed several wards on the east side, and then there was one ward on the west side. Then I look at this slide, and it doesn't give me that high detailed density. I know areas that they have just slaughtered us in, and I've had to, organize cleanup crews, put trailers out there that with no expense to the city, in order just to remove the debris. This was at a time when the city just would not function for me to clean up these messes. So I'm appreciative that we have a new director who's, when I make a phone call, the city gets out there and takes care of these illegal dumps that are happening in my neighborhood, which I'm so much appreciative for. So, but why doesn't this photo show that?
So the survey was a snapshot in time. It was a single day that the surveyor was there.
Okay.
So that would be kind of the main thing. So like on the day that the surveyor was there, they didn't see any illegal dumping. Now, it could have been like, the day after, they show up and dump the tires, dump whatever construction debris. So the survey is contingent upon like observations the day that we were there.
And this point density map might skew it. Yeah.
What was that?
The other thing, through the chairman to the councilman, this is just a point density map. So it's possible, just theoretically, like in your ward, if you had, like two that were just like really, really bad, and you just got, your phone was blowing up all day about those. Those are going to be less dense than say maybe 15 in another area. And there's no way to quantify the intensity of the illegal dumping. It's just a yes or no.
Really quick, just to add, so the other map that it showed that I was like second highest, is that based on 311 calls, or how did you base that percentage?
Through the chairman to the councilwoman, is this the map you're referencing?
No, it was,
Isaac's map.
No,
yeah,
the one that Isaac did?
yeah, it was like a 8.4%.
So through the chair to the councilwoman, there's just like the slight difference. So the map we showed was a point in time that a surveyor took a photo and said, is there dumping? That could be one tire, it could be 50 tires. The map I showed was, so let's say in your ward you have 15,000 parcels. What I demonstrated was a percentage of those parcels that had some form of illegal dumping, and what Dr. Kobe is showing is where that is most concentrated. So you might have more parcels that are experiencing dumping in your ward, but they're spread out, versus this is showing where there are the hot spots close together. So that it's, again, the same data showing slightly different things based on what you're asking it to do.
And just, to add, as Isaac indicated, that his information, they were actually there at that moment, right? So they were able to pinpoint and get that information.
Thank you.
Dr. Cope.
Thank you, Chairman. We're going to move on to sidewalk condition. So I think the good news is 75% of the sidewalks are in good condition. Again, this is in front of that individual parcel. The bad news is that we have sidewalks in front of 35,000 sidewalks that are damaged in some way. Looking at the map here, we can see where the most damage is. And we kind of have areas here in Old Brooklyn, Bella Purtis, and Jefferson are where the largest hotspots are. But you can kind of see there's this pink all throughout the city where there's areas of damaged sidewalks. So about a third of the parcels in the city have a street tree in front of them, and the size distribution is kind of even among small, medium, and large trees.
Councilman Harsh.
Through the chair, to all of you, because I don't know if any one of you has this exact answer. When we talk about doubling our canopy, do we think it can be done through doubling the street tree, or is that not going to get us to the canopy coverage? Because if we've got street trees in a third, and we get street trees in 2/3, that doesn't get us to the doubling of the canopy that we need, right? Because there's backyard trees and front yard trees, right? Does anybody know what happens if we get to our target for street trees? What percentage of canopy does that get us to? I'm trying to figure out how many trees people need to plant in their own yard out of their own volition versus how many trees we can plant to try to get to the canopy that that we want. You know what I mean? Make sense? Through the chair?
Yep, through the chair to the councilman. That's a good question. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one comparison that just because there isn't a street tree in front of Brown Stadium that we could put 50 street trees there, for example. So what we have done through the leadership of the Cleveland Tree Coalition is identified where there would be potential street tree planting, as well as large landowners and private property owners. So the key thing here to distinguish, think of the tree canopy is if a raindrop falls from the sky, what is the % chance of it hitting a leaf or a branch of a tree? So that's why it's not only the number of trees, but the size. So you could maybe have a large sycamore that has an enormous canopy versus a small, dogwood. Or you could have 3 dogwoods that wouldn't produce the same amount of canopy as 1 sycamore. So that's where I hesitate to give a specific one-to-one comparison. But I would say generally we need to be encouraging everyone, street tree, private property owners, and large property owners, that we need to increase our tree canopy.
On that point,
Yes, Councilwoman.
Councilman Harsh, thanks to the leadership of Councilman McCormick and Councilman Casey, we have our newly reconstituted Urban Forestry Commission. I am your representative on this commission, so I should be able to answer these questions cold. But I think, just to echo what I should be able to, I'm not yet, but try me again soon.
Okay.
But I think in response to what Isaac was sharing, I know that the city street trees do need to be a huge component of this. Right now, our leadership in urban forestry is saying we need to get on top of our emergency prunes, removals, and stump grinding, that maintenance, before we can begin a comprehensive planting strategy. So planting is a huge challenge. It's also expensive because you can't just throw a tree in the ground and plant it. You have to make sure there's a plan to help it be maintained and established. Yeah. So there's a lot to it. And then the last thing I'll say about street trees is there are lots of streets in Ward 15, and ironically, when we look at some of these maps about other kinds of things like illegal dumping and so on, those correlate, right? The D structures, the illegal dumping, there's so many things that seem to be correlated, but the tree lawns are too narrow in many neighborhoods to actually take a tree that can provide shade. So just wanting to echo what Isaac is sharing, that it really has to be a strategy both on public and privately owned land to get there. Yeah.
Yes. Our distinguished colleague, I'm glad you're on the committee.
Yes.
And I'm glad you're excited about getting called up to be an expert on this.
I am.
While you are all deliberating on this, just to throw some 2-3 cents in there on their humble suggestion. My major problem and issue in my neighborhood is that when the city in the days of old, that's about the best way to say it, planted trees that tore up the sidewalks.
Right.
And they gave no remedy on how to improve that, one, other than it being at the homeowner's expense. And two, the tree roots damaging the property sewer systems, causing for homeowners to pay anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 and more just to get their properties fixed. So as we begin down the proposition of putting tree canopies for future Clevelanders, and many who may not be here yet, my suggestion is that we choose species of trees that don't do that kind of damage to these people's properties.
Thanks. And just on that point, Mr. Chair, in response to Councilman Jones, the Cleveland Tree Plan is in place and with species recommendations, and I think that has all been taken into consideration.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Super.
Thank you, Chairman. So we already talked a lot about trees. This is just how the map looks. So to do this, a small tree counted as 1, a medium tree counted as 2, and a large tree counted as 3. So that way I tried to get an idea of what the canopy might look like in terms of density. And you can kind of see where that exists. We have two nice hotspots, one on the west side and one on the east side. So next steps. For building and housing, we're looking at blight removal. We currently have vacant property unit going out and checking out vacant D and F structures, determining if we need to condemn those or not. And then internally, we're thinking about how we need to use this information to pivot to proactive code enforcement. So those C structures, how do we protect those? How do we keep them from becoming Ds? How can we raise them up to be Bs? And lastly, just this conversation has been great, kind of thinking about what everybody else wants to do with this information. So kind of like what research is next. One of the things that was really interesting to me is to see how these property grades matched up with historic redlining maps. So the way to read the chart is across the bottom is best, still desirable, definitely declining, and hazardous. Those are the ratings that the Home Ownership Loan Corporation used to grade neighborhoods back in the 30s. So hazardous would be areas that were redlined. Definitely declining would be areas that probably had quite a bit of trouble getting any type of loan. So when we see how that historic disinvestment impacts property grades today, you can see that areas that were getting loans back in the 30s, those are the areas that have the best property grades. Areas of the city that were denied access to credit for home ownership opportunities, for small business expansion, those are the areas today that have the lowest property grades. I have a couple other ideas over there on the left. Isaac already talked about the tree canopy. It sounds like we're well on the way there. But I think with that, I'll turn it back over to the chairman for questions.
All right. Thank you for that. I think you're spot on with the correlation between, what we are seeing here and what historically has been done. And then I think you're right. You are right. And I'm sure we all agree with you. Again, great information. Thank you, all three of you all, for being here and sharing this information with us. I know we've been having kind of Q&A as we go along, which was good. But I'm sure there's some other questions that members would like to ask, and so, I will pivot to my vice chair first, if she'd like to ask any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the chair, congratulations. This is amazing data. This is something that we try to do. When I was elected, I was trying to do this on my own. Large, huge undertaking. But anyhow, through the chair, quick question. What do we do with this data now? Now that we have this, what is Building and Housing and the Health Department going to do with it?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, this data is currently being used by multiple departments within the city as we speak. So for illegal dumping sites, looking at it in terms of CD and their investments. So we are using it to inform our day-to-day work. But what I think for Building and Housing, at least, what we're doing the most with is developing legislation that's going to dovetail with this and allow us to begin to pivot toward that proactive response to code enforcement that we all want to see in the city. So Residents First, which has been read into council and will be heard soon, I believe, in a DPS hearing, is really the next step of this, as well as the reorganization of our code enforcement department, which is underway.
Thank you for that, Director. And through the chair to the Director, I know last year we heard a lot of discussion around our numbers for the paint program being low and the aging department being low. I'm curious to know, are we aligning this data with those resources, and who is responsible for that?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, yes. I know that at least in the CD department that manages those programs, they're spending a lot of time with this data. I know Chan Sang, who works in that department, has been poring over it, and I think they're developing a strategy to address it, as well as ARPA allocations and where those, are being prioritized, and, how we're marketing that information, or we will begin marketing that information, will be influenced by this.
Got it. And then my last question is, council members, how could we support, how could we help, analyze this data and really be strategic on the areas that are pretty blighted, that shows, that shows in the, on the graph? How could we help?
through the chair to the councilwoman, my colleagues here may have ideas, but one of the things we've been doing in building and housing is working very closely with the CDCs in these neighborhoods. And so we are meeting with them regularly now to kind of talk through strategy and what's going on in neighborhoods, to formulate our plan of attack. You know, when we go out and start doing proactive enforcement, as you know, our resources are always going to be limited, but of course we want to target the things that are causing the most headaches in the neighborhood. There's always those bottleneck properties, you know, that if those were resolved, things would go better in that block. And that's what we're trying to really hone down into, that level of data. And I think from your standpoint in council, you know, supporting the initiative of what we're trying to do to change things in building and housing to be more proactive, and also providing that ground level information to us is very helpful. And many of you do email me on the regular, text me, call me, send me pictures, and I find actually that's really helpful because these are the problems in the neighborhood. You know, and if you're looking at it from a 30,000-foot level, you don't necessarily know that that house on that corner is the catalyst for so much negative behavior in that neighborhood. You know, the house is falling apart, and then it's a contagion. You know, it spreads, the blight spreads. So we want to address the worst of the worst, for sure.
Got it, thank you. So just really quick, I know I said that was my last question, but our CDC staff, have they been trained already? Because I met with them and, yeah. And they couldn't even share with me how to access the data. So I'm a little confused.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, the data is loaded in NST. If they're using that NST web app, that would be one way, and I don't know if you want to expound on that.
And through the chair to the councilwoman, we also did do a presentation with Q&A similar to this to all of the CDCs at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress.
Okay.
So again, I'm not saying that every CDC was able to attend, but it is sort of has been widespread on the availability and how to access it.
And Ro, would you be able, if we reach out, come out, meet with us, with our CDC, and train us
Would
all
love that.
together? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I already sent you an email.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up on, again, a sort of course of action that we've found to be successful, again, with my former colleagues, Jackie Gillen and Jay Westbrook. When we were working in Council President Griffin's ward, you know, we targeted 1,100 properties that were identified as distressed through this. And we would work on those 1,100 properties over about the time period of 7 years, sending letters, working with building and housing. A lot of that led to demolition. It led to multiple hundred properties pulling permits to get rehab. Then it was working with faith-based leaders, Pastor Fields and his wife Iris, and Habitat for Humanity for doing infill. So again, admittedly, it was a relatively small area, but it was dumping cleanup. It was creating the Woodhill Community Garden. It was working with East End Neighborhood House. I mean, it really is all hands on deck, and having those local leaders with a strong council person and, you know, a nonprofit partner, that we were really able to see a lot of progress over a period of time. So that's just one way that you could use this data, but that was something we would meet with the city every month and go over those 1,100 parcels every time. Where are we at this one? Where are we with this one? And just really be laser focused and not just say, throw one request out into the wind and never follow up on it. I mean, you have to be on it for years if you want to see that progress.
Thank you, Ro.
No problem. Thank you, Councilwoman. Great points. Just a couple of things. And I know you mentioned that you all meet with the CDCs on a regular basis. You know, one of the questions that the councilwoman asked is how council members can be involved. You get nobody better in these neighborhoods than a council person, right? I get we often run to the development corporations believing that they can provide this information, they can better assist to provide info about the neighborhood. But I'm sure you all are aware that a lot of the CDCs are having high turnover, right? People are leaving, new folks are coming in. So the stability of the individuals who have been there, who really knew the neighborhoods, really don't exist anymore, right? But we're the individuals who are the most stable in the neighborhoods and who are here, there, and everywhere, who can provide you. So what I would strongly urge you all to make it a priority to engage the council members on that monthly basis as you do these CDCs, or however often that you engage the other partners, to make sure council members are invited to participate and engage them to be a part of those conversations, because that's really where you're going to get a lot of your best information to help guide you into the areas where you all should go. I know we have groups who are strongly pushing CDCs, and I get it, and they serve a purpose. However, if you really want information and you really want to understand these neighborhoods, who's there, what's happened there, and what's possibly going to happen, some of us could probably tell you the situations in people's households to tell you whether they're going to be there in the next 2 months or not, or whether somebody else is going to be moving in and they're moving. I mean, there's a lot of things that members can tell you all and help you all, but I want to make sure that I say that because that's very, very, very important, right? And a CDC can tell you that's a priority over there, but for us, that may not be the priority, right? That may not be the priority of the majority of the residents on a particular street. Now, there's times when CDCs and council people are really aligned and really know what's going on, but as I look across the city, I don't believe that is the case at the moment. I think, again, there is great relationships between members and CDCs. However, you cannot forget to include the council members in those discussions because that's where you're really going to get a lot of your best information from. And before we move on to Councilman McCormick, then Spencer, then Jones, one of the things we used to get was that condemnation list by ward, or condemnation plus there was a tab for properties approved for demolition. To the director and Joe Titron, when is the last time we received that? Because I don't remember getting that for quite some time.
2-3 weeks ago, I pushed that out. Dr. Kobe kind of mishmashed a couple data sets together for us and pushed that out.
Is that the traditional list we normally get? Or was it a little bit different?
I believe it was a little bit different, although I didn't pull it together. You got
Okay.
to at the table.
So that list, Dr., because I don't know, did you all receive that?
New condemnations came out recently.
Okay.
I don't think it was a comprehensive list, I think it was the list of new condemnations.
New conference condemnations?
Katie from the office had it on the machine.
Okay, go ahead. Dr. Cope.
To the chairman, I believe it's different than what council has traditionally received.
Okay.
Council used to receive I think it was demo contracts by ward. So that was everything kind of at the point of no return. So the reason that we pivoted to the different list is because it lists everything that's condemned and then everything that's been approved for demo. And approved for demo doesn't necessarily mean it's
Awarded.
ready to come down.
Right.
It just means the law department has reviewed the file
Said yes.
and said it's okay, and then we'll eventually have to review it again. So that list kind of gives you all a good idea of what's already condemned in your neighborhood. As Mr. Titron said, the list is kind of a mishmash of different data sets. So if you are using it and you have a question and you're like, this is already raised or this has been rehabbed, please just reach out to me and be like, hey, this is what's going on, because I can actually just mark it on my list. So next time you get it, it's not going to show up as condemned again.
Okay. And that there's some sort of identifier on that list that says condemned versus approved for demo, right? Or there's
Yes.
separate tabs?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's all one tab, but there's a column that says
That's
approved
identified.
or condemned.
Okay, sounds good. Mr. Titron, can you resend that to all members, please? Thank you, sir. Yes,
Mr.
Director.
Chairman, also, our Cleveland Foundation Fellow last year had worked on a council
Parsons.
priority. Brett,
Yes,
yes,
sir.
Brett Parsons, who's now in the CD department, had worked on a council priority demo tracker, which was a shared document, which
Yes.
was updated in real time. So things that you brought to us that your priority demo to show you where they were in the pipipeline.
Absolutely,
so
yes.
we're still
I
doing that.
recall that Brett Parsons was on top of
Yes.
her game. And in fact, I was coming up St. Clair, and they had began to hit a building that was on that priority list. So thank you for that. All right, moving on. Councilman McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we're going to work on that list too. I know we had a house on there that popped out and it was just beautifully renovated. So I'm like, get that thing off the list. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for hosting this committee today, and to director and everyone here today. That this is such a fascinating tool into the Building and Housing Department, partners at Western Reserve. I mean, you think about coming up with solutions, having conversations, directing resources, but you got to have this underlying data set first. And you guys have done a fantastic job not only developing the raw data, but then also putting it into places where people can understand, right? We can see bigger trends and things like that, and where we need to target resources, right? And I have said since the day I came to this table, addressing problem areas of the city helps the entire city. So I look forward to being able to continue to do that with this body. So thank you. This is really a fascinating tool that the city has led, and I'm curious. I guess I'll ask a question on that through the chair. Is this a model that other places have looked at? I mean, this seems really great, innovative, and thoughtful. I mean, are other places looking at this as a model?
Through the chair to the councilman, I would say it has generated some attention nationally because not a lot of cities as large as Cleveland have done it over time. We didn't spend a lot of our effort today focusing on that, but we did do this in 2015, and so from a research standpoint, some academics have contacted us and said, like, wait, you have records for every parcel from 2 points in time that you can. So I would say, to our knowledge, to also have an academic partner like Case Western Reserve University and the Poverty Center where this data is stored, and NST, I would say that's pretty unique, and I haven't heard of a city of our size that has this comprehensive data sets over a time period like we have.
That's great. Thank you. And then my question through the chair to the director, can we flip back to the slide on the vacant property? Let's see. I'll know when I see it. What is that one? Is that tree? Let's see. With the numbers. Yeah, I'm sorry. This one. Okay. Do we know, what is the data point of, how has this changed? What did the data look like in 2015? I'm old enough, I'm the oldest person on this committee from a council tenure period. But I remember, I'm going to, channel Mike Plensik back in the day, when we were in the day. No, but 8 so years ago, when we were talking about all the money going to demo and all the, there was 40 million needed left, and then where we're at and all that kind of stuff. And we've taken down many, many, many houses. So how does this compare to 5 years ago? What does this look like?
Through the chairman to the councilman, I believe the vacant DNF structures is about the same as it was in 2015.
Okay. At 4,000?
Yeah, I want to say it was like 4,500, 4,600.
Okay.
So we're about the same.
And through the chair, obviously there's been, since 2015, a lot of demo. So is that new properties going into DNF? Is that what's triggering that?
Through the chair to the councilman, that's the fear of those seas slip into the abyss and you can't bring them back. And so that speaks to the need for the proactive code enforcement to keep any more of this from constantly happening, where we always have a backlog of 4,000, 5,000 parcels that need to come down. We don't want to keep we don't believe we can demo our way out of this problem.
Right.
We need code enforcement, and that's the goal.
Yeah, and I would just note too, I mean, I'm thankful that we're thinking about this more thoughtfully, and because we've got this weird issue where we have a shortage of quality housing.
Right.
And we have 4,800 structures on DRF, right? And those could be decent housing for folks, right? And add to the supply and create more affordability. And so I'm thankful that we're looking more at those structures in a way to either, keeping C or above, but also looking at the DNF and how do we renovate them. And I'll just tie this into one of the things I was very passionate about in the tax movement conversation is allowing for 15%, 100% for renovation in the city. Because again, I think we need to be incenting from an environmental perspective, from an affordability perspective, renovating existing housing as much as humanly possible throughout our city, to clean it up, to get it safe, lead safe, all of that kind of stuff. So it'll be very interesting to see that 4835 number, where that's at in 2, 3, 5 years, and hopefully it's hopefully those numbers shift up. And don't just disappear in the sense of everything is being demoed, because we know how expensive it is, Mr. Chairman, to build new housing nowadays. So if we're able to reduce that cost and renovate homes in our neighborhoods, that's huge. So that's an interesting data point that hasn't changed much. And hopefully we can build systems where that is not the case, and the 43 and 63 numbers go up and the 48 goes down, right? I mean, ideally, to repurpose these homes back into good shape. So thank you, Chair. And again, I would just note that, again, fascinating tool. for everybody to look at. And through the chair, this is all public, right? It's all on your website for anybody, any citizen that wants to access it. Is that correct?
Yes, that story map, through the chair, that story map is available to the public. The NST is only available, the raw data, via, if you have a .gov.edu
Right.
or
But if
.org.
I'm a resident and I want to
You can
dive
go-
into this data, I can do
Yeah,
it on
you
your
can go to our
website.
website,
Okay. Thank you,
yes.
Mr. Chair.
And one, just through the chair to the councilman, I think you hit on a really important point that I was trying to make with talking about the system. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's over 70% of the housing stock in Cleveland was built before 1940. Does that sound right? So again, as we're talking about the system, looking at building permits, and someone who, didn't grow up here, it seems like very little was built from like 1985 to like
Yeah.
2005. And so you have these sort of peaks where if everything's built at once, everything is aging at once. And then, so how do we have those interventions, like you were talking about, to rehab before it's too late and you need all new mechanicals, floor, everything,
Yeah.
and it's almost as expensive as doing a new build at that point. Right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
Chair, I would just note, and I know the director is diligently working on this, but this is a great example of why we got to clean up the review process at the city. I mean, especially in the historic districts, I understand the importance of them, but I have 10 different panels talking about the siding color, and is it an aqua green or aqua verde green, and you have a homeowner's head spinning, and then the fire department says one thing, and then building it. All things you're well aware of, Director, but a great reason how we need to streamline this process so folks who want to renovate homes in our city are not sitting at the city hall, taking a packet of paper from one office and physically taking it to another. I mean, it's almost like a museum. So, and I know you're diligently working on this, and I really appreciate that, Director, but those numbers tell you why we got to streamline our process to allow folks to invest in their homes in the city. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, for convening the conversation today, and very, very beneficial. And thanks again to all of you for your hard work. I want to build off of some of the great questions that Councilman McCormick was asking to make sure I really understand. And I'm glad we're on this slide. I want to focus on this for a moment. So if I understand correctly in terms of next steps with building and housing, the building and housing team is going to be paying attention to the vacant DNF structures, looking at a strategy to deploy and inspect and potentially condemn. Is it an accurate statement to say, I know my opinion, but I would just be curious for your viewpoint, that we would expect that the majority of vacant DNF would probably be condemnable and may need to be demolished? I mean, kind of this whole thing about, I'm just kind of curious about the future of the vacant DNF, and would we expect that most of them would be condemned and would probably need to be demolished?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I would say with Fs most likely. I don't know about Ds. I
Okay.
think that could be on the fence. Our big hope is that with ARPA money and cooperation from banks and lenders and what's happening, through CD and their efforts, that we'll have more tools in the toolbox to get some of these renovated. And also being very strategic. And I know that Asia Aaron, who's now working with our Southeast strategist, Marvin, is doing a deep dive on the Southeast side of some of the potential opportunities here, too. So you all may recall Alan Nider, our Harvard Brookings Fellow, was doing his work around State of Ohio forfeited lands parcels. And so some of that's still going on. We worked with CDC's council people, Global Cleveland, over the past year to talk about State of Ohio forfeited lands parcels, because some of these are owned, in that Never Land state called State of Ohio forfeited lands, where it has tax foreclosed twice, no one has purchased it, and the city can take that, or a CDC can take that through the county land bank and do something with that parcel. And so every month for the last year, I was having these meetings and talking about opportunities, and if there was money, how much gap would you need, and how could you get this rehabbed? Because I agree with all of you that should be our number one priority, getting these houses back into productive use and not destroying them to create more vacant lots that we have to mow. I mean, that's not our goal. But If they are so far gone that they are creating a hazard in a neighborhood and they are so blighted and so far gone that they just need to be taken out, I want to do that as quickly and expeditiously as I can. And that's the charge that we're under. But I would say Alex Abramowitz, our demolition manager, is also looking at it through that same lens. You know, if there's some way that we could target this into a better outcome, great. We had a really interesting series of calls with a group out of Pittsburgh that we really think we should be modeling here. It's called Rising Tide Partners. And they are doing wonderful work going into a neighborhood and stabilizing that entire street by working with those residents to kind of co-create what outcomes they want to see there. But they'll use tools of receivership. They will take occupied properties. They will reperform those. And I think that's the type of aggressive neighborhood-led strategy we need to really move this needle. Because demolishing this every single DNF is not the answer, in my opinion.
Right. Thank you for that clarity. And I agree, though, I really appreciate the sentiment that we also don't want the 43,000 Cs to slip, any of them to slip into Ds. So that's really critically important as well. So my question through the chair would be capacity on the building and housing team. So it may or may not be true that traditionally we've done code enforcement as a complaint-driven practice. Now with this really impressive data set, trying to do some pivot to data-driven or strategic approaches, but the complaints are going to keep coming in. So my question through the chair would be just on the capacity side, how does building and housing anticipate being able to acknowledge that complaint-driven work is going to continue, but wanting to be more strategic and proactive?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, there's something very important we've been waiting on for more than a year, and that was the ratification of our Local 100 union contract. And one of the things that did was allow us to create a new category of inspector called a property maintenance inspector. This will allow us to more robustly recruit people to get them on the street. We've had a very, very difficult time, as have had all other cities in Northeast Ohio, been competing over certified code enforcement staff. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost, it's become almost comical. They try to up the ante and pay more and try to steal your electrical inspector. I mean, we did it in South Euclid. We stole people's electrical inspectors all the time. So I'm guilty as charged, but we need a different way to go. There aren't enough certified code enforcement staff, so PMI would be an entry-level code enforcement person. They're not going to be inspecting skyscrapers, but they're going to be out there looking at peeling paint and high grass and all the things that are dragging down neighborhoods. So we believe that by adding that category of inspector, we're going to be able to staff up more. We've had a lot of open positions we haven't been able to fill. And we have had a lot of staff turnover because people are bribing them to go to another city. I mean, and then our hands are tied because we have a contract, we can't pay them more. So our union contract limits what we're able to pay them. So that's made us very uncompetitive to retain staff. So we think this new strategy will help us staff up to be able to do what we want to do. And to be fair, are we ever going to be able to fully staff up enough to do what we would love to do? Probably need to add 100 more staff. It's just not something we're going to be able to do, which we understand. So that's why the strategy, knowing what the scores of these houses are and really targeting an effort to address them before, good interventions before they turn and start slipping. I mean, that's the key here, is using our resources as wisely as we can to address the chronic concerns.
Great. And then through the chair director, what is the name of that new category of inspector, PMI?
Property maintenance inspector.
Property maintenance inspector. And then through the chair, are those positions already posted, or you anticipate they'll be posted soon?
Very shortly. Yes, we're posting them now. So we finally got the contract ratified, pay ban, everything's set. So we will be very vocal when we get those launched to advertise them and encourage people to apply, because it's a great way to start your career in code enforcement, and then you can progress, and get your other certifications.
Great, and I'm sure that's something our committee will be really interested in getting follow-up on when those job postings are out, and that kind of follows Councilwoman Santana's question of what can council do to help. Certainly we can be part of the network that spreads the word about that. And then my final question through the chair is, we have this huge data set. How is it going to stay updated? Because new data is coming in every single day, right? About property condition. So, yeah, thank you.
Through the chairman to the councilwoman, so this is one of those things that we're currently talking through as we think about pivoting to proactive code enforcement. So this would kind of be the start. And then on the proactive side, we'll be going, out into the neighborhood without a complaint. We'll just be there to kind of to assess the conditions. And the idea is that the inspectors will be, looking at these structures, and then we're working to develop a record internally for building and housing so we can record the condition of the property at the time that we're out there. So the idea is that we'll always kind of be updating an area of the city that we're working in.
Great. And then through the chair, would that be updated in NST? Would that be the...
So through the chairman to the councilwoman, it would appear in NST, but it would also appear in Acela Citizens Access.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And how many PMI positions are we projecting?
I believe we're, and Mr. Chairman, I believe we're starting with about 10.
Okay.
I believe we have about 20 open positions, so we're also posting BIs and PMIs also.
Okay.
So, and then if you all approve our legislation, we certainly need to start forming different groups.
Sure.
And so we've got a lot of moving pieces with this, but a lot of thought's gone into it.
All right, sounds good. When you told me, I like the PMI positions, that can get folks out and look at those some would say minor issues that can really, create larger situations in these neighborhoods and on these streets. And will that contract, that labor contract, that will come back to us? We have to approve that, right? Do we know when that'll be over to us?
Through the chair to the councilman, this is not one of the things I know.
Okay.
But I would say that, the union has proved this, and so I'm assuming it's only a matter of time
Okay.
before you do so.
All right, so we'll keep a lookout for that. And when those positions go live, before they go live, or as they go live, that make sure that you get that to Joe Titron so he can get that out to all council members so we can help spread the word as well, so we can help you all reach out to people that can fill those positions. Councilman Joe Jones, and then Harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House around House Jones. House Jones. You like saying that, don't you? She likes that Jones thing. Your mom says her name is James. Mr. Chairman, to the director, and just to my colleagues. I've been here for a very long time. I've seen director go and director come, and building and housing. And I say that because I can't recall the last time going all the way back to Jane Campbell, someone having the background in housing to have these positions. A lot of times we have directors and commissioners that are given these positions, but they don't have the background. They don't have the training. They don't have the organization. And they've been given a responsibility to run departments that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And in this case, your department, you have a budget that's in the millions. And you're dealing with all the properties all across the landscape. I say that because I've come to know Sally Martin as being a really good professional, to be able to handle the difficulties of restructuring and organizing the city's building and housing is a task. And when you first got here, I looked at you in your face and I said, good luck, because I know that you have a lot of work to do. And that department needs to be brought up, and to hear that you have sort of kind of worked a system to get the tools necessary to develop capacity is important. And I just want to say to my colleagues on this side of the table and to your folks on this side, I would like to work with you in partnership to help you, because that department truly has sagged behind for so long that all that they knew what to do was to be in a responsive type mode, one. And then two, You can see when you showed us the slides, how racism is in the city of Cleveland. So bad, so mean, that you don't want to invest in the minority neighborhood. It just, looking at those slides, broke my soul and my spirit. And how the east side of the city of Cleveland has been absolutely traumatized and devastated. And when I further looked at what you talked about, which is a problem in our existing communities, some of our people have been patiently waiting. And they have been waiting for the last 20-some years to see something done in their neighborhoods. But all we've gotten in our community is a lack of opening up the pocketbook of the financial institutions just to lend to the citizens in the community so that they can improve their own neighborhoods. So they shut that down. And then we have seen the only response from government, the people's government, here in this city, the only concept they had, because of short-sightedness and a lack of vision and leadership, is to cut and destroy and tear down all the houses. So if it got bad because your department didn't inspect it when that shingle was out of line, when that gutter was falling down, if a gutter falls down in Shaker, if a shingle comes off in Garfield, then their inspectors take care of notifying the person who owns the property and giving them 30 days to fix it. I went over here on East 138th Street, correction, East 146th Street. And the woman's house has fallen all the way down around her, and she's a senior citizen. And everything has collapsed. And if we had a functioning department, that would have never happened. And the bad and the sad part about it is in your slides to show us some of these houses that have fallen down throughout the various different parts of the city of Cleveland, that shows me that the Department of Housing didn't work. So I want to work with you to do everything I can to give you the tools necessary. And I think that your proposition about looking at Pittsburgh's Rising Tides initiative is really significant and important, because our city hasn't compared itself in a very long time to how other neighborhoods operate and do business. And when we look at Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh has been beating the city of Cleveland for quite some time now on a number of fronts. And so, and the sad part is I've sat here at this table and even said some of the people who were the big wealthy people in this city went over there to Pittsburgh and developed Pittsburgh when they could have been developing here in this city. We have more ambiance than Pittsburgh. We have this big gigantic lake over here. Now, for the like of me, I don't know why some of our wealthy corporate people here decided to go to Pittsburgh and develop, and then go to Washington, D.C. and develop, and go to Boston and develop, versus developing in their own backyard that they grew up in, scrapping off the streets of the city of Cleveland. So all I want to say, Mr. Chairman, to the director who's here, you do bring funds back to your department on an annual basis. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the councilman, clarify what you mean by that.
Do you bring in revenues, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And Mr. Chairman, to the director, what is your revenues on an annual basis?
Through the chair to the councilman, typically around 18 million.
$18 million, typically?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, to the table that sit here today, and to our colleagues who may be listening, I think it's important that some of those funds go back into the department to develop capacity so we can expand building and housing to deal with this mammoth issue that is all across the entire Cleveland landscape. We can't begin the proposition of being able to do anything unless our department is strong and healthy. So my question, Mr. Chairman, to the director, what's your thoughts on getting an additional $5 or $10 or $15 million of that back into your budget, added to bring in the kind of capacity needed to deal with just your basic issues?
Through the chair to the councilman, I would say for my part, I'm determined to be a good financial steward of the public funds. So I appreciate all of your kind words, We absolutely will do the most we can with the least we have. And we will, we will leave it there, but I totally appreciate your support of us. I think we have a great team. I think the addition of Dave Roberts as our code enforcement law chief has been phenomenal, too. He's very excited about getting started with some of these new initiatives, and I think you're going to see a sea change in the coming year. The proof's in the pudding, as your colleague says.
Well, I'm excited in one part, but I know that you can't begin to change something this big unless you have the muscle to do it. And so, and the reason why I'm suggesting it is because we can badger you every day, beat you up, but if we're not giving you the tools that you need to have, that's an issue. And for us, on this side of the table, our constituents are, again, they've been patient for a long time, but their patience are running thin, and they see this administration should be able to be like Superman. And they want this administration to be like Superman because so many years have passed and they haven't gotten anything. And so then when you have people who have seen the change in government, they want to also be able to feel it and touch it on the street. So that's the reason why I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, whatever we can do to give you the tools to help you. And how can we get the Rising Tide program in the city of Cleveland? And can you elaborate and talk a little bit more about that?
Through the chair to the councilman, we were very intrigued by Rising Tide Partners and their work. They presented at a recent Vacant Abandoned Property Action Council meeting. We invited them back to have a presentation to some of our staff as well as some of our external partner agencies that do similar work, like our county land bank, because I feel like they serve a missing component that we're not necessarily doing. As you know, we've done receivership here now. We have 5 cases pending on buildings that, multi-unit apartment buildings that are just derelict over in the Shaker Square area, and that's going well. But taking these kind of tools, civil tools and other tools, and using them in an aggressive way, it's not necessarily the place of a government entity, but it is the place for a nonprofit entity or someone else. And so we're going to continue having those conversations regionally with people that are already doing similar things, but not quite the same way as Rising Tide Partners. And one of the principals of that organization is from Cleveland, which should be noted. He now lives in Pittsburgh and does this work, but certainly knows our market. And so it was a very, very interesting dialogue. But occupied, forfeited properties are a very big concern. I know we have the Make It Home program coming. That will be helpful, and that's through Enterprise Community Partners. But we certainly need a long-term strategy to stabilize streets and blocks and neighborhoods, and I think that's really what we're lacking. It's something we're all talking about right now. So we'll keep you informed about that, and thank you for your support.
Well, I appreciate that. And then, one of the things I want to talk about too is because this is unfortunately, you unfortunately have inherited, as you stated early, a systematic injustice to our real estate market on the east side of the city of Cleveland. And so my suggestion, Mr. Chairman, to the director, maybe working with some other departments, and I've long have said this on a number of fronts here, as having diversity, right? And right now we don't have enough housing developers to build in the city of Cleveland. And so how do we begin the proposition on both fronts, dealing with identifying these properties as you have eloquently did with this program, and how we might be able to bring in the kind of development needed to jumpstart our market house development in the city of Cleveland throughout the various neighborhoods. Because what we've seen, Mr. Chairman, to the director is politically selecting one neighborhood where investments go in the past, and then in other neighborhoods there has been no investment. And we've seen that on this strip here that's in front of us. And so how do we begin the proposition, Mr. Chairman, to change that, and or have you been looking at ways and means to work with other departments, and maybe even in your department, because you touched a little bit on that, because you're getting some of the ARPA funds to help with rehabilitation, or to have a fund available to help minorities and others who are rehabbing houses?
Through the chair to the councilman, as you know, the ARPA discussions have centered around this type of thing. Our CD department is doing a really good job of thinking that through, as well as just the entire development cluster. It's front and center on our radar. We are seeing some interesting trends in the market, such as modular home construction, which we have seen to some success, and we'd like to scale some of that as well to create some affordable new construction on those 20,000 plus vacant lots we have. So this is really on our minds, and we're talking about it every single day. So
that's like another part with inside your department of talking about how we do this too.
well, through the chair to the councilman, building and housing has, weighs in on these conversations through the development cluster, but it affects, all of the departments within that cluster. So planning, CD does a lot around this. We're all at the same table, and we talk about it all the time.
And Mr. Chairman, while you're there, because see, this is really important, how we develop our market space, right? If we are bringing in developers, one of my concerns, there is a great deal of affordable housing in the city of Cleveland. And there is a great deal of rental properties inside the city of Cleveland. What I would like to see is also not just be focused on low income, everything, all in there. We need to develop a product that will bring citizens into the city of Cleveland. And we need to have the kind of market rate home development program in the city of Cleveland where it appeals to, and it's a product that appeals to young people. And it has to be every bit of 2,100 square feet of space. And it has to be the kind of product that citizens want to live in. And oftentimes when I'm talking to my citizens or they're leaving out of the neighborhood, most of the time I ask them why they're leaving. It's a host of reasons. But one of the biggest things that hit me right in the face is they say, hey, the house is bigger. I got to walk in, closet in my bedroom. I have a bathroom in my bedroom. I have a his and her. I have an actual bedroom suite. And so how do we build those kind of products in the city of Cleveland to not only retain our existing residents, but yet at the same time be able to bring in others to come in because we have the product on our market space. But if you start building all these little tiny homes that some of these folks are talking about, and then some of these sticko houses, you're cheapening the city. I'm not saying that the developments you're referring to, because I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I've seen all sorts of ideals, and a lot of them, I told them that won't work in my neighborhood. That if you're going to build a house, build a quality house, build an attractive house. Make sure that that house has the exterior that looks good, and make sure that it has the amenities that these people would like to see. And if you start doing that, you're going to get Asia, bringing the developers, the banking and financial institutions to really play a part. It's important.
Yes. Through the chair to the councilman, great points all. Very true.
And then lastly, I want you to poach for us. I don't know if that's already started, but I don't have a problem with trying to bring in folks all over the place in order to build a team.
All right.
Like the Browns are building up their defense.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Councilman Harsh. And then Councilman House will close us out.
Thank you. I will be sure to get us to Mrs. House Jones very quickly. I'll be brief. My question is sort of the intersection. We've got, through the chairman, what was the number of vacant lots right now, ballpark, in the city? It's a bad
Through the
number.
chair, it's 30,000 vacant lots in total.
Okay, 30,000 vacant lots, which says a lot about affordable housing or the lack thereof in Cleveland. But when we look at the 15-minute city data and we look at areas that we want to prioritize for development and we look at residential areas that are outside of that, have we put any time into seeing if there were ways for us to condense residential parcels that are outside of our preferred area of development and take 5 parcels and put 25 trees on them? condense them, hand it over to the Parks Department, call it a forest. I remember 10 years ago, Detroit took like 100 acres and they planted oak trees because they thought they could actually make more money harvesting oak trees in 100 years than they could in trying to develop all this land that had been demolished. And I don't know that we have that size, and we don't want to take up industrial areas where we can put jobs, but have we looked at condensed residential that is outside our scope of where we want to center development, and maybe just instead of pocket parks, pocket forests? You know, have we done that at all through the chair to them?
Through the chair to the council person, yes, there's an initiative underway that is funded through the US EPA Environmental Justice Grant that's looking at that specifically. It's called Clevelot, and it's exactly that. How can we repurpose vacant land that does not have a high prioritization for traditional gray development and balance it with green development that would have benefits like dumping prevention,
Right.
Improved air quality, as well as decreased maintenance cost for the city. So yes, that is something that we're very interested in exploring.
I would love to get that information if you could, or if I could probably just Google it, right? Because yeah, the lots cost us money for clean and green and cut, but we don't make any money off of them. So if we throw a dozen trees on a parcel and in 10 years it's not good for dumping anymore, then and you don't have to cut the grass under the shade. This might be a great way for us to improve the canopy, take some of those parcels off. If you look at Calgary Park and Brooklyn Center, Calgary Park is entirely parcel off. It was originally going to be a development. The city decided against it some years ago. They turned the whole thing over to the Parks Department, but it's still parceled. If we ever wanted to develop it, we could just bulldoze it, and it's got the individual parcels. We could do that with these existing parcels, and then just sort of reforest the forest city by taking some of those, and then you take them offline. You push development back to where you want it to be anyway.
Through the chair to the councilman, one great example of this is on East 93rd and Way, called Jackrabbit Hill. That's what the residents call it.
Sure.
It's around 4 acres total size. It was an illegal landfill when East 93rd was being redeveloped, and it is still city-owned, but we were able to plant 100 trees there, and it's a good example. We're about 3 years in, so they are established. We've been watering them once a week through the summer, and if you want to go out, I'd be more than happy to show you what that could look like.
I would love to see that. It's just, it seems like a good solution to a supply and demand problem. Lastly, I think our vacancy rate is down to 8%. That should be fantastic. I think 7% is a healthy market. 7% vacancy means that you have wiggle room. People that want to move can move into a new place in the neighborhood. There's ways for people to join. So I think 8% vacancy in Cleveland is a bit of a win. It used to be in double digits and much higher in a lot of our neighborhoods. So that's a good overall healthy sign. So thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I know. It's okay. Thank you to the chair, to the team here. Good morning. So I have, I guess, basically 2 questions. One, in looking at, we talk about, is it the 10-year housing plan-ish? And I felt like, isn't it like 10,000 additional structures? Am I off with a number? What's the number for the Cleveland housing plan?
That's like 14,000.
Okay, 14,000. Again, I'm trying to do the math here. Right. So with the overall 10-year housing plan, how are we going to prioritize, like, what we are going to do and what we are going to put our effort in, understanding the vastness of the opportunity, the growth opportunities in front of us, and the capacities that we have to actually get the work done. So can you talk a little bit about what's the plan of prioritization? And I'm asking that reason specifically so that when people know what the prioritization is, then it sets real expectations, and people we may not agree with it, but at least you know it and you can communicate with it. And then I have a part 2 for that.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, my colleague Alyssa Hernandez probably have a lot to say related to the Cleveland Housing Plan and how things are being prioritized. Just from my lens in building and housing, however, what I want to do is what we've described, is just go out and start making sure that we're being proactive in our work, that we are, especially, we know that we have a Southeast side that has struggled, especially with disinvestment for so many years. So we are spending time there and starting some of our proactive enforcement efforts there. But, our blight removal is all over the city, wherever it's needed. So I would say, in terms of prioritizing investments, that's a question that's more broadly posed to our cluster. Jeff Epstein, Alyssa Hernandez, we have funds in CDBG, we have funds with ARPA, and how are those being deployed and what is the strategy there? And I would say it's, an equity. Everything we're doing in this administration is with an equity lens in mind, knowing that the reason I took this job was because of the east side of Cleveland and wanting to make a difference there.
So I guess a follow-up to that question I asked, clarifying. So I was saying a prioritization of code violations. Like, how are we going to prioritize it, knowing that you cannot do everything at the same time? We have this and we have the information, but then there's a whole process to actually do the actual code enforcement and proactive code enforcement. What is that going to look like?
Through the chairman to the councilwoman. So I think you raise a great point. Like, we can't do it all at the same time. Like, we need a spot to start. And the mayor has the Southeast Side Initiative, which is, an area to start. But then we also have all those areas that are concentrated Cs. So you can see, we could pick any neighborhood and there's a concentration there. So it's going to be using this to look at those areas, but then also, like, what other projects are going on? What is community development working on? What's economic development working on? What are the folks in streets working on? What's urban forestry working on? We kind of have to be aligned with what all the other departments are doing. So that way we can go and make sure that all these other projects that we're there to support and keep up the housing stock there. We think about planning with the 15-minute city that Isaac brought up. So, like, investments that are happening around that, we can look at those areas and do proactive code enforcement there. I don't know, Director, if you have anything to add to that.
Yes, through the chair to the councilwoman. Yes, what Tim is proposing, it reminds me, years ago, the city of Lakewood had stopped doing proactive enforcement, and they really weren't doing any kind of code enforcement. And so they relaunched their code enforcement efforts by doing a property survey. And then they started focusing on the C properties and sending letters out to all of them, and then, offering resources and issuing code violations. And here, we know we have some low-hanging fruit in some of those really deteriorated F properties, and we want to just get that blight removal done. So we can say we've, finished the blight removal job, and hoping that by focusing on the ones that are slipping and pushing resources out and then issuing code citations and following up on those, that we're going to get, a handle on those Cs before they slip and then need, a drastic intervention like demolition, or we'd even be thinking about that. So that's part of it. Just being out there and really doing the job in the neighborhoods. And I know many of you have been frustrated because you'd send something our way, and it doesn't appear that anything ever happens to that property. Nothing changes. It's very frustrating. It can be years later. There's a lot of reasons for that, but with the Residents First legislative package, the purpose of this is to better address out-of-state investors and people that really have had a hard time holding accountable with the normal approach to code enforcement that we've always used. The normal tools don't work anymore when the environment has changed. And so the purpose of all this legislative effort, and many of the colleagues here, or your colleagues, were at that table helping us develop this, is to look at it differently. What's happening now, and what tools do we need today to address that? And one of the ones that's being proposed is a vacant property registration ordinance, which works a little bit like a point of sale. That's very different for Cleveland, but it has been very effective elsewhere. And so exploring things like that are really going to be a game changer in this market, that's really the direction we want to go. Because without those new tools, it's kind of more the same. You go out, you issue a citation, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes they come to court, sometimes they don't. And everybody's frustrated. Why can't we fix that problem house? Well, new tools in the toolbox is what it's going to take.
To the chair, to the director, okay, thank you for that. My second question is, okay, so thinking through this, someone's going to be first and someone's going to be last. That's just how it always is in prioritizations. Are there opportunities for us to build, I would guess, like a skills bank, knowledge bank for the whole purpose of knowledge capture, knowledge transfer, specifically focused on neighborhoods, right? So when you think about C properties, things of that nature, people need to get resources to fix up their home. I'm simplifying it, but that's basically it. Right. Are there opportunities for us to kind of put together some steps that a block club could do to not wait for the city? Because I think that's one of the things we got to help give people this information so that they don't have to wait, because we do not have the capacity to do this for the city. We are going to have to share information so that residents can work together to get it done. If you have a group, we have it, in Ward 7, there were a group of residents who got together to say, we're going to get a mortgage together. We're going to build our houses together. Like, we got to start putting out and planting seeds so that people are in a position to actually take action when you're not the priority of whoever is in office, right? I really believe that. And so I don't know where that may fall into the purview of this initiative, but if you can talk about it, and if not, I'm requesting that we actually, as we're doing this work, we actually are building a toolkit just for everyday people. If you care about what's going on, you want to help your street, this is a toolkit to do it. You don't need no help. You don't need approval for anybody. You could just go and do it.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, empowering residents to be able to take on a lot of this is critical. And you're absolutely right. And there are things like the Tool Lending Library that's free of charge to Cleveland residents from Community Housing Solutions. We have organizations like Home Repair Resource Center that do classes and tell you how to reglaze your windows and all of those things. And I think the communication strategy around Residents First is going to be critical in terms of, the city is now very, very focused on code enforcement. I mean, this is a priority of the administration. It's a priority for all of you. We all know it's a high priority, but the narrative on the street needs to be, we're here to be your partner. We're not here to, hammer you over the head, especially owner occupants. We want to empower the people who are actually out in the neighborhoods trying to do the best they can. Some of the most impactful meetings I've been to have been some of the neighborhood meetings, and I've gone to some in the your area, Councilman Jones. And those are really interesting meetings because you have a lot of passionate residents that want to do the right thing for their neighborhoods, but they're feeling very stymied. The ladies on Stockbridge, for instance, have analyzed and provided all kinds of information about who's owning these properties, but then they're coming up at loose ends. Now what do? We have to hand it off to you. You need to do this. And I do. And I need the tools to go after the out-of-state investors, but also we need to work as a team and say, ladies of Stockbridge, what are the real headaches on your street? We need to be listening more than we're talking.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Councilwoman House? Anything further?
House Jones.
House Jones, I'm sorry. All right, we'll take our 90 days. Well, listen, thank you to the committee for the questions. I'm sure you'll receive questions follow-up from other members who were not able to make it today. Thank you all for being here and providing and sharing this information with us. Great detail, a lot of information, a lot of very helpful information to all of us, and so we just thank you. And I will encourage members to reach out to Isaac Robb to get set up to go and learn how to use the interactive map, but also I know all offices have access to NST and Acela, but make sure that I would recommend that you get a refresh NST training through, I don't know if that's through Dr. Colby or Mike Schramm at the Land Bank or Isaac Robb will do that, but we can ask Joe Tytron to help us get that coordinated with the NST training, among many other things that he's already has on his plate. So again, thank you all. We appreciate it, and meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you.